Mungo, how have the political and public policy responses to these big issues and the things that move you changed over the years?
Well, considerably, and on the whole for the better. I mean, I am a believer in the general progress of mankind, and I do think that most of our civilization has been a case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, rather than the other way around. So with that, I'm very much on Peter's side. But I think there are also a lot of the problems that David raised are damn near intractable. I mean, I have always held a strenuous dislike of any system which involves privilege and power over the norms of any kind. I was a scholarship boy at a rich private school, and that probably tended to shape many of my views. But and I remember then one of the hymns we were forced to sing was a hymn which was, everybody knows, as All Things Bright and Beautiful. But then I like to reflect on the second verse, which goes, "The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate. He made them high and lowly, and he ordered their estate." And this was, and this was what we were meant to believe, that some people were born to rule and some people were born to serve. And, you know, if you found yourself on the wrong side, well, stiff shit. But I think that has changed and that has improved. I mean, certainly in Australia at least, what vestiges there used to be of the class system have disappeared. I mean, any suggestion of the born to rule thing has vanished. The nouveau-riche might be unattractive, but at least they're not pseudo-aristocrats. And as David said, previously powerless groups in society, such as women, homosexuals, disabled to a certain extent, have now been recognised as have people of genuine need, and a lot of their needs have been accepted and recognised. And there has been a progress towards equality and egalitarianism. As David said, we'd like to have been faster, but at least it's happening. So I can't argue about that. There are other areas where the progress has been slower, Aboriginal affairs, for instance, which is something I might get back to towards the end. But I'm reasonably happy that people can make a difference, that within Australia, people power, while it may be hard to arouse and slow to act, in almost every case, it can make a difference. The Vietnam War and the protests against it was a case in point. The war went on for years and years and years and was a popular war for a lot of that time. But eventually, the penny dropped. And eventually the arguments against the war, the pointlessness of it, the illegality of it, the inhumanity of it, took hold, and eventually it ended. Now, I believe that that's something that can be done in almost every case, which is obviously why I continue to write the way I do. And I think even in the case of climate change, which at the moment looks to be an intractable political problem, it is going to be possible eventually to force the bloody politicians to get up off their arse and recognise it's a real problem, not just another political thing to be fixed, and that it will be done. But it will be slow, it will be difficult, and there will be those steps backward at the time. So from that point of view, perseverance is all.
Passions are clearly very enduring in all 3 of your lives, and I wonder if you have any idea what the genesis, where the seed of these passions came from. I remember in my late 20s asking my father, taking him to dinner, where did my sense of social justice come from? Who did I inherit that from? He said, "Bugger if I know, not from me." And I've never got to the bottom of that. I wonder if you've got any idea if there's people who influenced you in your early life and that set you on this course, David?
Well, I don't think it was my father. he voted for the Liberal Party all his life, and but I was lucky enough to go to a school called University High in Melbourne that was a very radical hotbed, and I was soon converted, and I had lengthy arguments with my father, and before he died he voted Labor once. So, not that that would be a great badge of honour these days, but no, but I do think there, alongside the enormous egocentricity of the human brain, there's also a capacity for compassion. Most of us, unless we are psychopaths, and there are usually about 2 or 3% of psychopaths in any given population, but most of us don't like to see other people getting hurt. In fact, we feel actually viscerally upset by it, especially if the person being hurt is relatively weak and powerless. When we see the atrocities in dictatorial regimes being inflicted on their people simply because the dictator has paid off a huge, vicious army to keep control, then we do feel a natural upwelling of sympathy for the downtrodden. So I don't think it necessarily has to be drummed into us. I think most of us do not like the spectacle of naked power hurting relatively defenceless people, and a lot of social unrest and a lot of social involvement comes from that decent capacity of the human brain, which to some extent balances the often extreme egocentricity.
Okay.
I think a lot of the desire for justice, for equality, for human decency, even for democracy, is simply common sense. It's taking a rational approach to how society should be run. Because if we don't have that, we have constant wars, brawling, strugglings for power, people jumping up and down on each other. And while some people do very well out of this, the majority usually don't. Technology goes backwards. Look at the Dark Ages and the sort of hierarchical structures that prevailed there. And you find really that the only way to make society function in any reasonable way, leaving altruism aside completely, is to take an approach where people are treated decently, where their views are listened to, where they have some say in the way the rules are made and how they're applied. And that's just the way things work best. So I would say that most rational people will behave decently. And I would put forward as proof of this that almost all religions are strictly hierarchical. And this is a combination of the irrationality of religion and the inability of religion to work as part of a functioning society. That if you believe that what's in science, if you don't have ideas of heaven and hell, if you don't have ideas of sin and redemption and whatever, you're much more likely to behave decently in this life.